This is a fan-generated show. If you'd like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our new Rumble channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm thrilled to announce the release of my new book, Obama's True Legacy, How He Transformed America. There's a reason why Mike Huckabee calls it a ferocious and chilling read. Order it now at Amazon.com or at FrontPageMag.com. Thank you, and may God bless you. Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. With us this evening, Daniel Greenfield, Shillman Fellow at the David Horowitz Freedom Center and the editor and writer of the blog The Point at Front Page Magazine. Daniel, welcome back to the Glazov Gang.
It's always a pleasure to be here.
Fantastic to have you, Daniel. One thing after another, very surreal, kind of scary, surreal world we're living in, if those are two words I can use. So now we have this indictment of Trump. There's not an indictment of Biden. There's not an indictment of Hunter. There's no indictment, let alone even an investigation of Hillary. But they indicted Trump. Why don't you just open up in general on that for us? What are your thoughts?
Well, we now know, due to Congress threatening FBI Director Wray with a contempt of Congress vote, that the FBI had information that there was a $5 million bribe paid out to Joe Biden. They've had this since the spring of 2020, and they've apparently done nothing with that information. That information, apparently from the former CEO of Burisma, which was the Ukrainian energy firm at play here, a man who's also been accused of being a Russian intelligence asset. This is a little bit ironic in light of the whole Russiagate scam. The FBI has been sitting on this $5 million allegation forever. Meanwhile, there's a dispute over documents with the National Archives, and of course, immediately we send in the FBI, and already there's an indictment. Compare the pace of the investigations of the Democrats, whether it's Hillary, whether it's Biden, including both Joe and Hunter, with this very rapid express train to an indictment. There's absolutely nothing surprising about this. We know the double standards that obtain. We know the corrupt motivations of all this, and yet it still is something that needs to be pointed out.
Absolutely. Daniel, we have a new book out together, Barack Obama's True Legacy. And I'm the editor of that book. You contributed some very priceless essays to the book. Thank you so much. The betrayal of Israel under Obama, how Obama funded the murder of Israelis. You also did how he poured fuel on the fire of racial tensions in America. So Obama just aggravated everything. But you know, there's other brilliant people like yourself that contributed to the book, and I think it's very, very timely, especially what we're talking about right now, because Joseph Klein touched on Obamagate in our book. I think it's more timely than ever, because what we see happening against Trump right now with these intelligence agencies, with the justice system, all in the hands of the left, where were these seeds planted? Where did this, in what fertile soil did all of this grow? Well, we look back, Obama's war on General Flynn, the FBI's war on General Flynn in Obama's hands. This very much paved the way to what we're seeing now, didn't it?
Well, absolutely. And Joseph Klein's work in the Obama book is something that is absolutely not to be missed. He really connects the dots here. In my own work, I actually have an article on this up on Front Page. I connect actually the targeting of General Flynn using the Espionage Act. Now they're targeting President Trump under the Espionage Act. This has always really been a piece of legislation that under Democrats, beginning with Woodrow Wilson, was used to target political opponents all along. Obama, however, there was a kind of respite during the Cold War. Obama came in, and Obama's big idea for everything, and this is something we delve into in Obama's legacy, Obama's idea was to weaponize every area of government. This is what the left does very well. It's what distinguishes Democrats, even corrupt Democrats, from the real hardline left. Obama weaponized everything. That included weaponizing intelligence tools. Previously, intelligence tools were meant to go after enemies of the United States, terrorists, China, Russia, so on and so forth. Their big idea was, let's take these intelligence tools that we have, including the Espionage Act, use them to go after our domestic political opponents. And obviously, Obama is out of office, but his people are still carrying on the work in the Biden administration, really Obama's third term, hopefully not his fourth term. They are still carrying on this work. They are still targeting political opponents using the tools of intelligence, of national security. So when you see President Trump under indictment, what you're seeing is the work that Obama began. He began it incidentally by targeting journalists. Under Obama, whistleblowers and journalists, for the first time, like James Rosen, a Fox News reporter, were suddenly being targeted under the Espionage Act because they were exposing some things that the Obama administration was doing. And the Obama administration got away with it. There was some criticism from the media, but ultimately the media shut up and took it. And once they saw that they could target journalists, whistleblowers with the Espionage Act, they escalated to targeting General Flynn, who was targeted with the Espionage Act early on. They escalated now to targeting President Trump. And if they can target a former president using the Espionage Act, then they can target anyone.
Absolutely, Daniel. And I strongly urge all of our viewers, go to frontpagemag.com. And on frontpagemag.com, you see our queue of articles there. Read all of Daniel's articles. And we also have his blog, The Point. He's covering all of this masterfully. And Daniel, this is in world history and the world in general, we know how strong evil is, the power of evil, at least during this timeline. I'm a Christian, you're of the Jewish faith. A lot of our views conflate on this issue. We know God is the most powerful, and the day will come where he will, there will be justice, but there's a certain timeline where, there's a certain evil that prevails during a certain period. And I think we're in a time like that. And as Ronald Reagan had said, that every generation is one generation away from slavery. So we have to keep fighting and fighting and fighting constantly, because freedom, it comes so in such a difficult way. And so that's why in the American Constitution, why it's such a precious experiment, is the founding fathers tried their best to fight against this, to set up boundaries, to set up these, different branches of government and individual rights, et cetera, et cetera. And now we see the left, it's succeeding in turning the United States into a banana republic and just another dictatorship throughout history, the way all dictatorships have worked. So all of these very sacred things that the United States has and had are being chipped away at. So like you say, the Espionage Act and how that's being used to really hurt the Constitution in this particular realm right now, what they're doing against Trump, it's just terrible. And then there's other things. Attorney-client privilege, in many respects, is one of the foundations of our democracy, of our republic, of our freedoms. And they actually went very hard at that too, didn't they? The left is killing attorney-client privilege because the way they got to Trump is actually threatening his lawyers, correct?
Exactly, beginning with Michael Cohen and Rudy Giuliani. The current Clinton special counsel is now going after the testimony. They've interrogated 3 Trump attorneys. This is massive. Violating attorney-client privilege once is somewhat extraordinary. Violating it 5 times with 5 attorneys, I suspect there is no precedent in American history for that. Now, this has a dual purpose. Obviously, one way you're violating attorney-client privilege, you're getting at information, your privileged information you're not normally supposed to be able to get at. But the second thing, and this is what we're seeing also with Trump having trouble getting lawyers and legal representation, once lawyers know that they themselves are a target, this is something we saw in the Soviet Union, the lawyers, of course, are disinclined to represent people that are going to make them targets. They do not want themselves to be hauled into court. They do not want to be on the receiving end of subpoenas, of investigations, of potential criminal charges. So this is a perfectly good way to isolate somebody, to prevent them from even having legal representation. Now, just to highlight the hypocrisy of this, when Lynn Stewart, who was a terrorist attorney for the Blind Sheikh, was actually taken down for being used to pass information messages promoting, urging terrorist attacks, telling his associates to carry out terrorist attacks, The entire leftist establishment, the legal establishment, arose and clamored that by actually intercepting these terrorist communications, this was a violation of the Fifth Amendment. They were eliminating attorney-client privilege, and this was an attack on America. Never mind that the Blind Sheik was a terrorist leader and that Lynn Stewart was actually directly conspiring with him to incite terrorism. But that was a violation of the Fifth Amendment. Meanwhile, 5 violations of attorney-client privilege with Trump, that is somehow not a violation of the Fifth Amendment. And of course it is a violation of the Fifth Amendment. The left has gone after the First Amendment. They've obviously tried to destroy the Second Amendment. Now they're going after the Fifth Amendment. Which amendment will they hit next?
Yeah, when you have a leftist lawyer colluding with the Blind Sheik and with the Muslim Brotherhood, and the whole agenda and objective is to hurt America, the left is just so upset about the violation of attorney-client privilege. But in this particular case, if they can stop Trump from running and ruin his family and ruin him and put him in prison, it's just the best thing to do. Yeah. So the intelligence agencies, the justice system, in the hands of the left, and it's all about suppressing political opposition. And really what it's all about is stopping Donald Trump. And Donald Trump, once they get Trump, like Trump often says, they're not after me, they're after you. And it's so very true, because if they get Trump, he's the one that's defending our freedoms. And so this attack on Trump, in many respects, it's this, they're going at the parents at the school meeting that don't want a drag queen shaking his behind in their child's face. They don't want their children being sexualized. And it's an attack on those parents. It's an attack on anybody that disagrees with anything that the left says, right? This is all about suppressing political opposition. It's the continuation of the Bolshevik coup in America.
Yes, to the left, anybody who is not entirely 100% with them is an enemy to be destroyed. That is, of course, what the Bolsheviks implemented. It's what the left is beginning to implement in America. If you think about it, so many of the victims of cancel culture are not even remotely on the right. They're not even centrists. They're not moderates. There are people who are liberals, but for them, there was like they're 80% on board, they're 90% on board, they're not 100% on board. J.K. Rowling, who was very much on the left, was 80% on board, 90% on board, but women, replacing women, she was not on board with. So of course she has to be canceled. And of course you can imagine what they do to anybody who actually is a conservative, who actually is on the right, who actually disagrees with the left, not 10%, but 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100%. We've seen in the past that every Republican, no matter how liberal he might be, still ends up being hetero when he runs for president. McCain, Romney, no matter how weak and squishy they were still the worst possible. They were going to usher in a fascist right-wing regime. That was the messaging. And of course, once they're out of office, that's a whole other story. George W. Bush was Hitler when he was in the White House. And of course, once he's out of office, well, he's a shining example of what Republicans can be. And in the past, you can actually go back 50, 60, 70 years. You see the same exact rhetoric. Every single Republican presidential candidate was, of course, the new fascism. Eisenhower, obviously Nixon, obviously Reagan. But really, no matter how moderate the Republican was, once he runs against a Democrat, once he's up against somebody like Obama, he has to be destroyed. He's the worst possible extremist, and everything is justified.
Yeah. So Daniel, just to make our way through this mess. Okay, so we see all these indictments against Trump. Okay, so I was reading it. Okay, and without the larger context, people can go, he's waving a classified document in front of some reporter saying, here it is, or so, and it just sounds so horrible. But when we really start analyzing it, is this really some kind of threat to national security? Is this really espionage? Is it really arming our foreign enemies? Do we attack the American Constitution and destroy it just for this? And also, in a larger context, when you begin to look at what Obama was doing, when we begin to look at Hillary, who is subpoenaed and information is subpoenaed, and she, whatever she did to her server, all that stuff that she crushed and broke or got her hammer, all that stuff. When we look at Hunter Biden, when we look at Joe Biden, and now apparently a foreign national gave him money for, to change a policy or to have a policy. This is targeted selective bullying and prosecution, and it's actually Sunday school class compared to what the Democrats have been doing. Am I correct?
There was a National Archives representative who testified in Congress under oath, but pretty much every administration in the last 40 years has had these issues. Jimmy Carter ended up with classified documents. We saw Biden having documents in his garage, for goodness sake. So the basic reality is this kind of thing is commonplace. Now, what's missing from this indictment, they make the case that the documents were stored in an unsecured fashion. Let's even take that at face value. What the indictment does not assert, let alone try to prove, is that any foreign nationals, any foreign governments actually secured access to any of these documents. Now, with Hillary Clinton, we know for a fact that foreign assets were able to access her email server. So when she was maintaining classified documents there, we know that foreign organizations, that foreign nations did get access to them, which of course is a far more serious issue, because the question isn't just, are you storing classified documents insecurely? It's, was there actual damage done by storing classified documents insecurely? Did enemies of the United States, with foreign nationals, with people who should not have access to them, actually get hold of these documents? Because the basic reality is former presidents, senators, cabinet members take home documents. They take home documents that may end up being classified by accident or deliberately or whatever it is. This has been going on for at least 40 years. It's been going on probably longer than that, considering the Carter administration. The question is, did anybody actually get hold of those documents, and therefore was damage actually done? With the Trump case, they have failed to completely document the idea that any actual damage was done. Whereas with Hillary Clinton, we know that classified documents were secured. And by the way, this is just, began by talking about Obama and the Obama legacy. There were massive hacks of American classified information, of defense secrets by China under Obama. Absolutely nothing was done beyond some meaningless sanctions of some Chinese officials in response to that. Right now, the Biden administration, Secretary of State Blinken is preparing his big trip to China. And China, in response, has been repeatedly hacking. We just had another major hack right now of everything from U.S. Navy infrastructure, classified materials, in general infrastructure, targeting Guam, targeting massive amounts of defense systems. Again, China is doing this. There is no response. Now, that's not exactly the same scenario as storing documents in your garage, yet it's actually much worse. Is it worse to store documents in your garage that are classified if nobody actually sees them, or is it worse to continuously undermine American national security, to allow China to steal classified information and do nothing about it?
And legally, a president has a right to take classified material home with him, correct?
It depends on the specific classification. I don't really want to get into these weeds because it ignores the bigger picture. I mean, there are arguments about classification, declassification authority. There are a lot of documents that are overclassified. We still don't know for sure exactly what was in there. We have them making various claims in the indictment, but in the past, we've seen that when they make grandiose claims, the reality turns out we're dealing with outdated documents. So we don't really know. We may not know until the trial actually gets underway. We may not even know even once the trial gets finished, because they try to keep everything secret. I think in a bigger picture, instead of getting into the weeds, the bigger picture is this, which is that the Democrats have done this repeatedly. Every administration has been caught in the same kind of situation. This is a political prosecution. It's politically motivated. And in fact, the entire justification for the prosecution is a process crime. When it came to going after Hillary Clinton under the Espionage Act, FBI Director James Comey came out and he said that no reasonable prosecutor would bring such a case. Why not? Well, because nobody's actually prosecuted at that level under the Espionage Act. No cabinet member, no senator, no president certainly has been prosecuted under the Espionage Act. The entire basis for this prosecution, when you look closely at the indictment, is that Trump was basically resistant to the process. He asked his lawyers for a workaround. He said, what can we do about it? Without that, there really would be no indictment at all, which means this is a process crime, which is what they've been doing since day one with Trump. Their investigation generates the entire criminal proceeding. That's the bottom line.
Daniel, what exactly is a process crime?
So there's been a good example in the past, which was Martha Stewart. So Martha Stewart was, as people remember, was accused of insider trading. She was never actually convicted of insider trading. They were never able to prove anything like that. But what they did convict her for was obstruction of justice. This is one of the things they're going after President Trump for, is obstruction of justice. And they're legitimate obstruction of justice charges, but in many cases, obstruction of justice. When you don't convict anybody of an actual crime, you just convict them of obstruction of justice. What you're basically convicting them of is resisting the investigation. And do people have a right to resist an investigation? Arguably, that is a fundamental right for a criminal defendant to be able to resist an investigation, especially when they have good reason to think that the investigation is unfair, it's illegitimate, it is out to get them. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I don't want to get too far into the weeds here of what you can legally do and what you can't. But we've seen in the past with Trump associates, that what they're actually going after them for, General Flynn is a classic example, they're going after them for is not anything they actually did. They try to go after General Flynn with obstruction of justice. They try to go after General Flynn with the Espionage Act, with the Logan Act, which has literally never been enforced. It dates back to the American Revolution, or a bit after the American Revolution. Finally, they settled on accusing him of lying. This is the literal definition of a process crime. There's no actual crime here except the one generated by your investigation. If there had been no investigation, there would be no crime.
Yeah, they're fishing. They've gone there and then they begin to fish, right?
Yeah, but they never actually come up with anything during the fishing. They don't actually end up with an actual crime. All they do is charge somebody with crimes generated through their investigation. Thus, it's not like they find the guy was secretly a pedophile or shoplifting from Walmart. What they find is, well, this guy did not properly cooperate with us. If there's no investigation, then there's no crime. It's frankly the bottom line.
Oh, this is just, I don't know whether to laugh or cry. I often think, what was Hillary hiding? What did she destroy? Why wasn't she punished? And one of the reasons she wasn't punished is that Comey finally said, her intentions weren't bad. It's just, would Comey say the same about Trump, to defend Trump, that maybe in a few of those cases that with these documents that his intentions weren't bad? Would the Democrats defend him on that level? It's kind of absurd thinking of Comey defending Hillary on that level, isn't it, in the context of how they're going after Trump now?
This is, again, a classic process crime situation, because you're presuming the intention of the person you're investigating. Hillary Clinton, of course, has good intentions. She's a Democrat and a leftist, so we have to give her a pass. Trump, of course, has bad intentions because he's a political enemy. What you're really saying is you want to protect Hillary Clinton, you want to get Trump.
We're going to get a quick word from our sponsors, and we'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell. Years ago, when I invented MyPillow, I was faced with every adversity you could think of. No retailers wanted to sell MyPillow. That's come full circle. Vendors took advantage of me, and I was copied by China. Well, by the grace of God, I was able to get through all that and learn from it. I have a passion to help other U.S. entrepreneurs, and that's why I created my new platform, mystore.com. We have hundreds of products from amazing entrepreneurs, and to celebrate, I'm going to put my pillows on mystore.com right now. You can get my standard My Pillows regularly $69.98, now only $19.98 with your promo code. Or you can get my standard queen size, regular $79.98, now only $29.98. Or you can get my premium king size, regularly $89.98, now only $34.98. So go to mystore.com and use that promo code on your screen to get huge discounts on all My Store products. Thank you and God bless.
And we are back with the hero and great editor of The Point, Daniel Greenfield. Daniel, in one of your blogs, you write how it's very curious how Joe Biden is laying low. He's suspiciously silent on the Trump indictment. And you write that it's partly connected to the fact that he's not an innocent bystander, he's the criminal. Tell us about that.
If you think about it, it's really strange. You're running for president. Your main opponent has just been indicted. What do? Well, of course, you slam him. You hit him. You do a victory dance on his body because, look, this is the thing that every politician in theory would pray for. My chief opponent has just actually been indicted. And what does Biden do? He goes silent. And apparently he tells the Democrats the DNC, just keep quiet, don't comment on the Trump indictment. So you're supposed to assume, of course, that Biden is so gracious, he's such a man of honor and dignity, that he will not stoop to attacking his chief political opponent, except, of course, we know that is absolutely not true. And set aside all the Hunter Biden laptop stuff. This is the guy who not all that long ago gave a speech declaring the Republicans were the enemies of democracy, surrounded by United States Marines. This is a guy who has had no problem using dirty attacks against his political opponents. He certainly targets all sorts of conservatives on a regular basis with smear campaigns. And yet suddenly here he's very hands-off. No, we can't possibly touch him on this. Well, why do that? Well, of course, he's saying that it's because, he doesn't want to seem suspicious, doesn't want to seem like, his administration had anything to do with his own attorney general signing off on an indictment of his political opponent. That is obviously partial. This is not the way an innocent person behaves. An innocent person in this scenario would actually say, this demonstrates why my political opponent is unfit for office and why nobody should possibly vote for him. Instead, Biden strangely says nothing. Very, very strange. But this is, of course, what you do if you actually are guilty, if you actually are the guy who signed off on going after your main political opponent. It's like they find the husband who murdered his wife, and the police come in and he's very shocked and surprised. Oh, I don't know anything about this. He pretends to be very surprised. Biden is, playing innocent here. He's trying to act like he's an innocent bystander, and he does this in a way that is actually artificial and implausible and unreal and not natural, which is what criminals tend to do. Because they're trying to pretend to be innocent, but they don't actually know what an innocent person is like because they are not innocent, and Biden is not innocent.
Absolutely. Look, the fix is in. These Soroses and Schwabs and Yuval Hararis and Gates and Fauci's and the Bidens and Kamala Harris and their whole infrastructure thing here, they got a lot of power, and I fear what may happen. They have the capability of actually putting Trump in prison and of doing a lot of ugly things once they get Biden back in, or whoever they get back in. Maybe we'll have Kamala Harris as president, and she'll be cackling and laughing, telling us all about space while the enemies of America damage us further. What is some hope here, Daniel? I'm thinking maybe Trump's lawyers can postpone the trial for a long time. Then he can win the election, then somehow maybe pardon himself if he's convicted, or maybe the lawyers can really pull this off. Who's going to be making a decision? Is it going to be a jury? Is it going to be a judge? What's some of our hope here?
Well, first of all, I think I should really emphasize that President Trump is not going to prison. I do not believe for a moment that is happening. I don't think they have the case. I don't think they even actually want to put President Trump in prison. What they want is to obviously get Biden in for another term. And to do that, they're pulling out all the stops. Trials like this are going to drag on for quite a while. Hypothetically speaking, if this actually does turn into that, President Trump is either reelected and then he's able to pardon himself, or there are various gimmicks where he can temporarily step down and as vice president pardons himself. Under the Nixon administration, it was determined that generally presidents probably do have self-pardoning powers. Alternatively, somebody else wins the presidency. Another Republican was the presidency, and it's President DeSantis or President Tim Scott or whoever becomes president and pardons President Trump. Alternatively, Biden, we hope not, but gets another term. I don't think they're going to, at that point, continue pursuing President Trump because they will have gotten what they wanted, which is power. If President Trump were to run again in, say, 2028, then, of course, the machinery would would crank up yet again. But
okay, just a second.
Trump actually does go to prison. The realistic scenario, unfortunately, is one where the Democrats remain in power for another 4 years. That is the nightmare scenario.
Right. Okay, just a sec. So we're definitely on the same page here, Daniel. We might agree to disagree a little bit on the level. You think that, of course I agree this is about power, but I also think these are such vindictive, sadistic, sick, evil people that, yes, it's about power, but it's also about destroying good people. It's about destroying Trump. They hate him. and they're just going for him and his family just because they can and they want to, in my view. But you think that this will very most likely not succeed in terms of getting Trump in prison? You don't see the left and the globalists succeeding in that?
Well, even in the previous cases where they've targeted Trump associates, there's been in some cases some prison time, and mostly there have been these really long, drawn-out trials. And you think about the costs of a federal trial; they're massive in terms of money, in terms of emotion, in terms of obviously distracting you from whatever you want to do. This is really the key thing. You know, we've heard all these loud noises, threat to democracy, this person did that, this person did that. When you actually look at the amount of time they're going to spend in prison, in many cases, it is fairly light. And again, I don't think President Trump will actually spend any time in prison. What they want to do is, first of all, they need a hate object. I think of this scene in 1984, the 2 minutes hate scene, where they get everybody there. They're screaming, they're howling, they're going nuts. It's like the Nazis witnessing Hitler. They go completely crazy when they show them their hate object on the screen. In that case, Emmanuel Goldstein. And then the 2 minutes pass and everybody kind of sits down and they're worn out. We've seen them pull this stunt before. They've done it with George W. Bush not all that long ago, where, you know, Democrats, leftists would go absolutely crazy mad, screaming with hate. We should hunt him down and kill him, hunt down Dick Cheney and kill them. They're war criminals, they're monsters. And then now they couldn't care less. So there's a very much a 2 minute hate where they trigger them and they go into foaming paroxysms of hate. You asked them about Trump before Trump got into politics, they would not have cared very much.
No, but they care.
4, 5, 8 years from now, they will not actually care about Trump. They will go out crazy about whoever the new conservative Republican hate object is of the moment, because to them, it's about getting these people to be so hateful, to be so crazy, to give up their humanity in doing so. A lot of this is not just about Trump. It's not just about going after the people they go after. The purpose of cancel culture is to get these people to do horrible things. It's kind of like how the ancient pagans would get people to commit horrifying acts, like putting their children through the fire to worship Moloch or other things. It's about a big part of it is, you know, remember the picture of the leftist who was just screaming like crazy when Trump's inauguration happens. This is the mindset they want to cultivate. It's like the Nazis screaming like crazy when Hitler gave his speeches, or the Maoists during the Cultural Revolution just abusing, assaulting people who were their former political allies. It's about getting people to abandon their morality and do horrible things. And Trump is a means for doing that. Every Republican has been a means. Now, Trump obviously has been a great fighter. He's doing a lot. But at the same time, I want to emphasize this is not going to go away if Trump were to go away. For example, if Trump were to be hit by lightning tomorrow, the left will be just as evil and just as crazy. In fact, even more so, they will find something else because they need hatred. Hatred is their purpose. It was their purpose before Trump, will be their purpose after Trump, and this is what we're fighting.
No, absolutely. But definitely Trump very successfully and powerfully fought the left, and he fought back. He wasn't the nice guy that Romney tried to be, and he's not that failure, wimpy Republican. He fights, he fought back, he won, he interfered in Obama's legacy, he interfered in that whole Bolshevik experiment. They hate him for that. He loves America. He's trying to protect America during this time of the leftist globalist attempt to take over this world. And they absolutely revile and hate him for that, and they're out for him. And I'm glad to hear what you're saying. I hope you are correct, that in terms of him and what they want to do in terms of prison, that they will fail. But so just let me ask you this, Daniel. So it appears that the lawyers can postpone this whole leftist attempt, and that there can still be the election and Trump will still be able to run, and that this may successfully be postponed and let Trump still run. Am I correct?
Well, we'll see how it plays out. I will note that a lot of things are going to depend on the judge, and the Democrats definitely want a trial around the election. They're not even going for a surprise here. They absolutely want there to be a legal proceedings happening around the election for political reasons. And if they have their judges making the call, then obviously that's going to happen no matter what Trump's lawyers do. On the other hand, if there is actually reasonable, somewhat fair-minded judiciary in place there, then they would actually avoid having any kind of trial right before an election. Among other things, it's just tainting the whole process. It's tainting the process of the election. This is, as President Trump accurately said, massive election interference. It also taints the trial itself. But again, it all depends on the judges. We've seen what DC judges did with cases against Trump's allies. We've seen what they've done to cases brought by Durham. So this is not going to be a DC case. Nonetheless, I think we should prepare for the worst in that regard. And the worst is not that President Trump is going to go to prison, but the worst is that they are going to try to have judicial proceedings around the election.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And interfere with his ability to win and to save America, which is the last thing that the left wants. And they're just salivating at what Obama fertilized, what he set up, and what Hillary was supposed to finish off. Now Biden's finishing it off. And these Bolsheviks, they're just bloodthirsty. And they want to destroy. They want to destroy human freedom. They want to destroy individualism. They want to destroy prosperity, human talent. They hate God's creation. And Trump is defending that. He's defending America and the precious experiment that it is. And you know, it's just incredible. It's so interesting to watch and haunting to watch. MSNBC and CNN, and they can't even cover him. They can't even cover a speech. They're like, oh, we're not going to cover it any longer. He just lies too much. These dictators and totalitarian-minded people, these demons, they can't even allow anybody to hear him speak. That's how totalitarian they are. Did you catch that? How they won't even cover a speech of his?
Yeah, we saw them doing this for a number of years already. It's escalating to the point where you literally will, I would not be surprised that if this goes into court and there's coverage, they're just going to cover the things that the prosecution says. They're not going to cover anything that he says or that the lawyers say. That's really becoming very Soviet. Yeah.
It's just our establishment media. It's just like watching one of those parades during, on Red Square during Stalin's time, or in North Korea, and watching the military marching up and down. It's just scary. This whole Biden, okay, we're talking about this scary thing over here. Now, this is kind of scary. Now, it's just everywhere we look, Daniel. It's just some kind of dark, tragic comedy, but it's perverted and it's sick, and it's just everywhere that we look. So now we have this president. It's so embarrassing. It's so absurd. And what's going to happen there? You had a blog, who do the Dems replace Biden with? What's going to happen here? Are they actually going to let him run again? Is there a plan somewhere to throw him under the bus? But then who's going to replace him? Is Kamala going to run and start cackling and run advertisements with her talking to kids about space? It's the whole thing is kind of surreal, isn't it?
I've been saying for quite a number of years now that Biden was going to run for re-election. Few people in conservative circles believe that. I did warn that it was going to happen. Democrats absolutely did not want Biden to run for re-election, but whatever Biden's state of mind is, he did one really smart thing, and that is pick Kamala. He picked somebody that absolutely nobody would allow to replace him. There's no possibility of a 25th Amendment when your vice president is somebody who seems even worse than you are. So he wore her like a human shield. Once the midterms came out the way that they did, the Democrats were prepared to dump him. Once the Democrats survived the midterms, dumping him was no longer an option. Everybody, including Newsom, bowed out. Now, there are still some Democrats who fantasize about getting him out, but the options for doing so are limited. His people rigged the DNC primary calendar to put states that are, friendly to him, states that he could not even possibly lose, like South Carolina, where the black vote is going to be delivered by Representative Clyburn, a close Biden ally. He's the guy who made him president by giving him the South. So a lot of those black Southern voters are going to vote for Biden no matter what. They're very, very loyal. And that leaves rather few options. And at this point, no major Democrat who was part of the establishment, like Newsom, wants to run directly against Biden. So they have two options. One is just stick with Biden and hope to carry him over weekend at Bernie style. The second option is to force him to step down somehow, and that's where the possibility of a Hunter Biden scandal comes in. This is why the media has sort of begun covering the Hunter Biden thing. They've been covering it warily. Once Biden actually officially becomes the nominee, they're not going to cover it at all, except to say this was a Russian conspiracy. But for now, they are kind of hoping that maybe they can use Hunter Biden to get Joe Biden to step down and not run for re-election. But I think they're being excessively optimistic. I think they are likely stuck with Joe Biden, and that is going to be catastrophic for them. This is also another reason why they're going so aggressively after President Trump, why they need this indictment, because their candidate is so horrendously bad. If they had a mainstream establishment Democrat on the ticket instead of Biden, I think they'd be less frantic and less obsessed with destroying President Trump, less afraid that he might actually win.
So, Daniel, what do you think is going to happen?
Predicting the future is a tricky and dangerous business, but the reality is, I think the public overall telegraphs the fact that they're either reasonably satisfied with the way things are, or they're unsatisfied with the way things are. The public is pretty clear that they're dissatisfied. And I think a lot of political operatives make a lot of October surprises and various ad campaigns and things like that, and they spend hundreds of millions, billions of dollars on things in order to change the outcome. And yet I strongly suspect that in many cases, they really do not work very well. When things are generally okay, they might work, but when things are bad, when the public is miserable, when the economy is bad, when things feel insecure, when the majority of people are saying the country is on the wrong track, then I don't think they work very well. So the Democrats have to overcome the fact that things are bad, and they've made them bad. So whatever they do to Trump, whatever they do to anybody else, whatever propaganda they put out there, the bottom line is things are bad for people. You look at poll, people are not happy with the way things are. So unless they manage to turn the country around before the election, which I don't think they have a shot at doing, they're going to lose.
And so there is a chance that Trump will be back in the White House?
Now, are they going to pull out the stops beyond just having any kind of election? The important thing to remember still is that they have a powerful ballot harvesting machine, which they've used to change the odds before. They're working on things like Secretary of State races. Republicans still, even after 2020, when Democrats changed the rules using their secretaries of state, Republicans still have not paid enough attention to that. They are still not ready for ballot harvesting. They're not ready for all sorts of assorted other areas of fraud. But the important thing to emphasize is some people act like voter fraud, ballot harvesting, that's it. It's unwinnable. What it actually does is, if there's any kind of competitive race, then yes, at some point it just becomes unwinnable. If you're operating in a state like California, where it's just the entire infrastructure is ballot harvesting, and you've got a Democrat tilt on top of that, then yes, elections at that point become pretty much unwinnable. In a national election, it still doesn't make elections unwinnable, but you need to have a plan. You need to have a plan going in. President Trump, or whoever the actual nominee is, actually needs to fight this from day one, and actually have a plan to contest this, embrace some degree of ballot harvesting in some states, fight it in others, make sure to keep track of election rules and fight that from the very beginning. That's really important. And second of all, it cannot be a close race. If it's a close race, then the Democrats win. I remember back in New York City, Mayor Rudy Giuliani at the time, you would say, he ran for office the first time as mayor, and he saw there were already hundreds of votes on the voting machines even before the polls actually opened. This is what Democrats do. They've only become more sophisticated at doing it. If there's any kind of close race against a Democrat in this kind of situation, you've already lost the race. So it has to be a landslide, otherwise you lose.
Yeah, and just, we know that in those swing states, Trump is up by hundreds of thousands. Then all of a sudden they stop voting. Then in the morning, somehow Biden is ahead. Dinesh D'Souza's film, 2,000 Mules, very sobering film. Do you think that the Republicans have done anything to safeguard things a little bit better this time around?
They're at already. We're still lagging, and unfortunately, that's still the case. There are a lot of people who talk about these problems, but very little action is actually being taken. Now, some states, in all fairness, have banned private funding of elections, the Zuckerbucks thing. which is important. There have been a number of other measures. For example, we looked at recently at West Virginia, where they outlawed foreign funding, which you wouldn't think is an issue, but is absolutely an issue. So there has been some incremental stuff, but overall, at a state level, Republicans tend to focus on gerrymandering, which is obviously useful if you want to win local elections, but they're not really focused enough on winning national elections. They're not focused enough on cleaning up state elections so you can win nationally. And unless that changes, most Republicans put serious money behind Secretary of State races, ballot measures, all things that actually change the election rules, and also very importantly, fight Democrat election rules changes. Things like extended early voting calendars, the DMV stuff. All this really needs to be fought. And until Republicans are actually affirmatively fighting it and actually trying to change the game so that it benefits them rather than Democrats, we're not in a good place. And the close races are going to be lost to the Democrats under those conditions.
Daniel, in our book, Barack Obama's True Legacy, which I hope all of our viewers will get and tell all your relatives and friends about it, maybe even a few of your enemies. In Robert Spencer's conclusion to the book, he mentions how Obama in 2008, just during his campaign or whatever, he's getting off the plane. He's got this book, The Post-American World by Fareed Zakaria, and he's carrying it like this, and he's got his finger, it's very important. He doesn't lose his place in that book, but everything is planned. That was choreographed. He wants the world to know, just like the Illuminati have their little signs with each other. He wanted the world to know that he was reading that. And he really accelerated that whole process of America's decline and the growth of other nations, especially the enemies of the United States and the ideologically. That's what the Dems are up to, and if they win again, they're fulfilling very much what Obama accelerated, and that moment of him carrying that book meant a lot, didn't it?
Absolutely. We see this expressed on an ongoing basis in the policies of the Biden administration. We see this in China. We see this in the Middle East. We see this around the world. Obama's big idea was that America was the problem with the world. You had to usher in a post-American world. And then that world would be much nicer place because America would no longer be a problem because we would be powerless, we would lead from behind, we would not actually interfere or prevent our enemies from doing anything. And we now actually see this fantastic world that Obama ushered in. It's one where China is actually ascended as a world power. It's a place where Ukraine and Russia are in the midst of a destructive war that had its origins, partial origins, certainly during the invasion of Crimea, which again came under Obama. We have the ongoing disaster in the Middle East, the escalation of terrorism, international and domestic, and the general sense that America is no longer capable of actually protecting its people, protecting other people for that matter. And this is something that Obama wanted. He promised that the world would be a better place for it. The world is a much worse place for it. But to the left, they're doing much better.
Daniel Greenfield, thank you for coming on the show. May I close the show by saying that you are a scholar and a gentleman and also a great man.
Thank you so much. As always, it's a pleasure to hear your thoughtful discourses, to have our wonderful conversations, and to continue this fight, which we are doing in Obama's legacy, bringing together talented essayists to expose the real story and the real roots of the crises we're dealing with now.
And should we also be consistently praying to the man above?
People depend on one politician or another. Ultimately, the ultimate power is God. And, the left thinks that there's no God, that it has the power. The reality is that ultimately all questions will be settled by the one above.
Amen. Daniel Greenfield, thank you for coming on the Glazov Gang.
My pleasure as always.
Continue the good fight. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining the Glazov Gang this evening. Get our book, Barack Obama's True Legacy. You got to read it. Make sure you're subscribing to the Rumble channel of the Glazov Gang. Right now, if you're not subscribed, press the subscribe button and instant notifications. And make sure you are reading Daniel Greenfield's blog, The Point, at frontpagemag.com, and also all of his articles on the magazine. We'll see you soon. Good night.